call them by name, hopefully, like Jesus said he could. But what if they're not here? When Paul wrote this letter to the churches of Galatia, he wrote it because there were Judaizing teachers. In other words, teachers who were bringing up Judaism and trying to reinsert that into the gospel and say, you need to come back to the law. And so a number of Christians were being discouraged. Some of them fell away. And Paul writes this whole letter to try to encourage the saints to be faithful to the one true gospel. And then he says, as he's closing this last, what we call the 6th chapter, he says, if anyone's caught in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. Who is that? Who are the ones who are spiritual? Maybe a better question should be, who should that be? Who should be the spiritual ones? Elders? Well, I would hope the elders would be considered spiritual. Those who lead us as deacons? Well, I would hope the deacons would be considered as spiritual. Just elders and deacons? If you care about the sheep that are lost, I'd say that is a spiritual value. And if you care, then to that degree, you're qualified. Take just a moment and think to yourself, who is there that is not here and habitually not here that really should be here? Who do you know? Who do you care about? Who do you think about? Who is on your mind? What sheep is there who's missing for whom we might put out a woolly alert? Are you spiritual? And by no means am I trying to cast off the responsibility that we as shepherds, that's what we're called shepherds, shepherds of sheep. I'm not trying to cast off our responsibility. I'm just thinking to myself, when a shepherd knocks on your door, that's one thing. Well, of course, a shepherd. Especially if that shepherd happens to be a preacher. Oh, man. You know how many conversations have ended because Debbie introduced me as the preacher? Here's my husband. He's the preacher at so-and-so church, Choctaw Church of Christ. And, oh, really? Oh, okay. I think I hear my mom calling. Still, I have that responsibility. Each one of us as shepherds have that responsibility to seek the sheep that are not here. But what if all of us did that? What if every sheep that lost the fold not only was contacted by a couple of elders, but what if several members contacted them, called them, wrote to them, emailed them, texted them, knocked on their door, harassed them until they could not stand it any longer, and they said, I'll come back just to get you off my back. Wouldn't that be great? I know. You're upset. I'm upset too. I think that's the way it ought to be, really. And I think there are several passages of Scripture that teach us that. What Paul goes on to say here in this brief text is that those of us who consider ourselves spiritual, who care about those that are lost, should go and restore them. But here's how we should do it, looking to ourselves that we too will not be tempted. Because there's not a one of us here who's not above becoming faithless. What do you want the church to do when you become the one who needs to be reached out to? What do you want the church to do? How do you want the church to respond when you stop coming? When you lose your hope? Whatever it is you want the church to do that. Do that. He says in verse 2, bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. What burden? Whatever burden it was that caused that sheep to drop out. Whatever burden it was, whether it was a sin or just loss of interest or depression or whatever that caused them to lose faith. Bear that with them. Talk to them about that. Be patient, be loving, be kind, be tender-hearted, be forbearing. But to bear the burden, what do you have to do? You got to be there. You got to take part. Bear one another's burdens. There's another text I want us to look at in connection with this. It's in Luke chapter 9. Interestingly enough, it's the one that Kim spoke from just a few minutes ago. Luke chapter 9, starting at verse 51. Jesus had resolutely set his face to go to Jerusalem. Why was he going to Jerusalem? As Kim pointed out, he knew what he was going there to do. He knew what that place held for him. He sent messengers on ahead of him, and they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make arrangements for him. But they did not receive him. Those naughty Samaritans would not receive Jesus because he was traveling to Jerusalem. When his disciples, James and John, saw this, you know what they said. Let's call down fire from heaven, burn these guys up. And what did Jesus say? He rebuked them. Is it fun to be rebuked? It is not fun. But Jesus rebuked them, and he said, you don't know what kind of spirit you're of. The Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. Jesus didn't burn anybody up that day. But he still went to Jerusalem. Now, he could have said, you rotten Samaritans, I'm going to Jerusalem to die for you, and you don't have a clue. I'm giving myself up for you. I'm going to be crucified for you, and you don't care. Jesus take it personal? He didn't take it personal. He didn't get upset. The only people he seemed to be upset with were his apostles. And he went on to Jerusalem. And he died. And he died for those Samaritans just like he died for you and me. Why is that? Why did Jesus do that? And of course we know the answer. It's because he came to do one thing. He came to seek and save the lost. Now if that's what Jesus had resolutely set his face to do, and he says to us, you who are spiritual, when you see one caught up in a trespass, not being faithful, what do? I would think he would want us to resolutely set our face to do something about that. Now, there's 9 of us elders. I'm sorry, 7. Yeah, I never was good at math. Boy, that's kind of ironic that a shepherd doesn't even know how many. If I don't know how many shepherds there are, how am I going to know how many sheep there are? Oh boy, this is not looking good. I was thinking optimistically about more shepherds. No, I'm just going to quit. Leave that right there. We can't do as much as all of us together could do. And there are people that you can reach that I would never be able to reach. They see me at the door, they see me on the phone. They're not going to respond like they might if you called them, if you talked, if you texted, if you wrote. A woolly alert. Who's missing? We want you, if you will, if you know someone who is out of duty, we have our list. We want you to tell us what your list, who's on your list of those for whom we should send out woolly alerts. Write some names down. Give them to us. Contact us. 7 elders, 7 shepherds. Write those names down and give them to us so we can be planning to make contact with them. There's another text that I want us to look at here in Luke. It's chapter 15. I imagine this is one of the most familiar passages of Scripture in all the New Testament with most church-going folks. It's Jesus talking about the lost sheep. Chapter 15 of Luke, verse 1. All the tax collectors and the sinners were coming near to listen to him, but the Pharisees and the scribes began to grumble, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. What was Jesus doing? He was seeking lost sheep. And so he tells this parable. What man among you, if he has 100 sheep and has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in open pasture and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? What kind of a question is that? It's a rhetorical question. They knew the answer. He was asking to make a point. Who wouldn't do that? What shepherd wouldn't do that? And they're saying to themselves, well, any shepherd would do that. You got a lost sheep, you go after that lost sheep. That's why he asked the question. When he's found it, he lays it on his shoulders, doing what? Rejoicing. Yee-haw! Found my sheep. I like to shoot a bow and arrow, and for years I've built up my own arrows. I buy the raw cedar shafts, and sometimes you got to take them in the kitchen and heat up a pan of water and let it steam and get those shafts hot because they're not straight. And when they get hot, you can bend them and you can straighten them out. It takes a lot of work, but I enjoy it. I like this kind of stuff. You got to have a little ferrule tool to trim off both ends, because you got to put the little plastic knock on one end and then you put the steel point on the other end. And then you stain them and you can paint them and make them any color you want them to be, because there's every color out there to make an arrow. And then you put fletching on. What's fletching? Well, that's just feathers. And the feathers I like to put on with most are the ones that come off the turkey wings. You go turkey hunting in the spring and you kill a turkey. Is that so you can eat a turkey? No, that's so you can take the wing feathers and make fletching for your arrows. It's a lot of work, and I love it all. And I get that arrow put together, and then I see something out there in the woods. I think I can hit that stump, and I shoot that arrow. And sometimes arrows don't hit their mark. I know. And they'll bury up in the leaves and in the grass and in the dirt. And they can be hard to find. How long do you think I look for an arrow that's lost? I look a long time. A long time. Why? Because that arrow is important to me. How about sheep? How important are sheep to Jesus Christ? When he comes home, he says in verse 6, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, I found my sheep that was lost." And he says in verse 7, "I tell you that in the same way there will be more joy" where? More joy in heaven over what? Over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. To find them, to gain them back. I'm the same way. I've got all these arrows in my quiver, and I look at them and I don't care, I got one lost. I got to find the one that's lost. And I'm looking, I cut a stick and I drag through the ground, and I search and search and search, and I'm hoping for just one little hint of the color that I know that arrow is, or the mark on the ground that it might have made. I'm looking for any clue to tell me where I shot that thing. I'll go back and I'll try to stand where I shot it, and I'll line up with what I was shooting at to get a line, and I'll drive something in the ground and go back and where the arrow is supposed to have hit, I'll look at that and say, here's the line, this is where it should be. But sometimes arrows hit things and ricochet, so I know I gotta widen my search, because I want to find that arrow. Do we want to find lost sheep? Sure we do. I could put a number of names before you right now, and I won't do that. But there's not a name up there that you wouldn't look at and say, oh yeah, where are they? We want them back. Because we care. We care because Jesus cared. He taught us to care. There's another text, John chapter 10, about Jesus being the good shepherd. Now you can read the first 10 verses where Jesus talks about being the shepherd and taking care of the sheep, and the sheep going in and out, and how he knows them by name. But he says this in verse 11, John chapter 10 and verse 11. "I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees." Well, why does he flee? He's a hired hand. He's not concerned about the sheep. But Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me." I've not been very good at this. I've not been as good a shepherd as I should have been. And I can make excuses. Oh, I've got this to be doing and that to be doing. I got this person to call on who needs encouragement. They're coming, but they're faithful. And I see the list of people, and I think, well, I don't know if I should go see them or not, because I don't know that they even care. I can talk myself out of all kinds of uncomfortable situations. That's a problem that I have. You ever have a problem like that? Perhaps as soon as this lesson started, you thought, oh, he's talking about looking for lost sheep. That's not my business. I'm not the one to do that. That makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to go talk to people about their soul. I wouldn't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Oh, I have things to say, but I don't know what the right thing is to say. I just know that I'm going to go to them. What do you think I'm going to try to do? I'm going to try to reason with them. I'm going to try to express my love for them. I'm going to try to express my concern. Now, you tell me as a human being, when somebody comes to you and you know they're coming to you out of love and concern, you know that they don't have to say the right stuff, because what do you already know? You already know where you should be. You already know what the problem is. And it doesn't lie with the person who's coming to you on behalf of your soul. And we're talking about the shepherd and the lost sheep. What about the good shepherd? What about his providential working in this whole matter? What do you think he might be doing with their hearts and their minds? I've encouraged myself, and I'll continue to do it. I'm not in this by myself. I know I've got the other 6 shepherds. You see what I did there? I subtracted myself and I came up with 6. Got the other 6 shepherds and myself. I'm not alone in this, but I'm not alone if there's 7 shepherds or 10 shepherds or 1,000 shepherds. There is God. I want to encourage you this week to contact somebody. Yes, write the name down, give it to us. But you consider yourself to be spiritual. You contact someone that you know is missing. What would happen if someone who's not here today, who should be, got 20 phone calls this afternoon? How do you think that would impact them? What if they started getting emails and texts? What if we just flooded them with an outpouring of love? Because that's all it is. That's all it is. You who are spiritual, what are you supposed to do? Restore them. Restore them. One text with which we'll close is from 2 Peter. You may be familiar with this one because, well, it's pretty scary. At least I think it's scary. I think it's one of the scariest passages in all of the New Testament. 2 Peter chapter 2. It's kind of breaking into a context. But we'll start at verse 17. Try to get the whole thing. Peter's talking about those who've fallen away. These are springs without water, mists driven by a storm, for whom the black darkness has been reserved. For speaking out arrogant words of vanity, they entice by fleshly desires, by sensuality, those who barely escape from the ones who live in error, promising them freedom, while they themselves are slaves of corruption. For by what a man is overcome, by this he is enslaved. For if, after they have escaped the defilements of the world by the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and are overcome, the last state has become worse for them than the first. Do you understand what Peter is saying? If someone becomes a Christian and escapes through the blood of Christ the corruption of the world, and then they go back to that corruption, the last state, Peter says, is worse than the first. What was the first state? What was the original state? The first and original state was they were lost. They were doomed to an eternal hell of fire and darkness and torment and destruction. That was the first state. What could be worse than that? What could be worse than that is to be saved through the blood of Christ and then abandon that salvation all over again. It would be better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than, having known it, to turn away from the holy commandment handed on to them. It has happened to them according to the true proverb: a dog returns to its own vomit, and a sow after washing returns to wallowing in the mire. Do we have any dogs we need to be out there looking for? Any sows in the mire? Church. We know what we need to do. Let's do it. Let's do it. The election isn't necessarily the biggest thing happening this week. There's nothing in the Scriptures that says, based on who's going to be elected, there's going to be a cheer go up in heaven. But the Scriptures do teach us that if a lost sheep is found and brought back to the fold, all of heaven celebrates. We're going to stand and sing a song of encouragement and invitation. If you're not part of the sheepfold of Christ, we invite you to let us know that you want to obey the gospel this morning and become one of His. If you've failed in your responsibilities, been faithless, and want to come back, we want to pray for you. Whatever your need might be, whatever your desire, we ask you to express it by coming forward and letting us know while we stand and sing the invitation song together. Johnny?